Namaste. I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in beautiful San Diego. Thank you so much for subscribing to this channel. Please make sure that you like the video you've just watched and consider making a contribution on our app or on our website. It's really easy to do, and thank you in advance for that support. It does make a difference. So today we're concluding this series on taking a look at the virtues and the graces, and we've been looking at some concepts and ideas and words that sound rather old-fashioned. If you missed any of them, you can go back and grab those lessons from our website or from the YouTube channel. But we talked about prudence and what that is as a virtue and how to live from that. We talked about temperance and moderation and justice and strength and fortitude. We've looked at faith, we've looked at hope, and today it's an exploration of love. And not the kind of love that we usually see in movies, not necessarily the kind of love that we hear in many love songs, but the kind of love that is a spiritual expression of our oneness. I want to begin by sharing a piece from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And even those who are not super familiar with the Bible, if they have any familiarity with it, usually this is one of the passages that they do know something about, and some beautiful, beautiful words about love. And I'm just going to read part of it to you. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Love never fails. As I was reflecting more deeply on the concepts in this passage and on the idea of love, just over this weekend in particular, I was struck by how 1 Corinthians is describing what love does, what love does, what love gives, not what love gets. What love gives. It gives patience. It gives kindness. It doesn't give envy. It doesn't boast. It's not proud. It describes what love does. I remember a long time ago, the first time somebody said, love is a verb. And I'd never thought of it that way up until hearing somebody say that. And it just struck me so deeply. I thought, that's really true. That's really true. Love is a verb. And we all remember from elementary school and learning grammar that a verb is about what? It's about action. It's about action. A noun is a thing, right? Usually with a noun, it's something you can touch. A verb is action. Love is a verb. 1 Corinthians is describing what love does, not what love gets. When we're young, when we're young, we usually think of being on the receiving end of love. Stop and think about that for a moment. When we're young, I think we usually think of being on the receiving end of love, on the receiving end of love. But as we mature spiritually, maybe I should say if we mature spiritually, we can mature. You look in the mirror after 33 years. I looked at myself 33 years ago in the video. It's like, what happened over 33 years, right? So we all grow older if we're fortunate enough to keep living, right? If we're fortunate enough to keep living. But just because we grow older doesn't mean that we are maturing spiritually. But as we mature spiritually, if we mature spiritually, we seek to give love. We seek to give love, and we seek to give it without strings attached. We seek to give it unconditionally, but even more than that, Even more than that, I believe we seek to be it. We seek to be it. There's a progression there, isn't it? A progression from seeking to receive love. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be loved. In fact, I think we're supposed to be loved. It makes us feel better on all levels, right? But it doesn't end there. That's the beginning of love. There's the progression from seeking to receive it to growing up spiritually, to giving it without strings attached. Jesus talked about when he said, "What reward do you have if you only love those who love you?" You are to love, he was implying, I believe, you are to love the unlovable. You are to love those who are sandpaper to your soul. You are to love when it is not easy to love. So we move from only seeking to receive love and to be loved, to giving love, to what I think is much deeper and truly the spiritual expression of love is to embody it, to embody it. When we love, we act differently. I'd like you to flip back in your mind to the first time you really felt that you had fallen in love with someone. Can you think back to that? Can you think back to that? You've acted differently, I bet. You probably wanted to do everything you possibly could for that person. You probably wanted to spend as much time with that person as you possibly could. When we love, we act differently, but there's a difference between being in love and being love. If there's only one thing you walk away with this morning, maybe that would be the thing to walk away with. That there is a big difference between being in love and being love. The former, being in love, needs a person to be in love with. It needs an object. It needs an other to be in love. But the latter, being love, is a state of being that's not attached to any person. It is the expression of that quality of love that is not attached to a person, a place, or a thing. It's an emanation of consciousness, an emanation of energy. It is a way of being in the world that recognizes that we are not just this one being, that there is a connection between all of us, that we are not our brother's keeper, as the Bible would suggest. We are our brother. We are our sister. To be the embodiment of love, or at least to desire, maybe that's the beginning part of it, is to desire to be that, to be the embodiment of love, not just to enjoy receiving it, not just to take action and to give love, but to seek to be it is to seek to be a beneficial presence, no matter where we are, no matter what is going on. It is to seek to be that. Being in love is about romance. Being love is about spiritual practice. Being in love is about romance. Have you ever been in love and fallen out of love? Been in romance, fallen out of romance, right? It's a human experience. Being love is a spiritual practice. And it actually doesn't take another person to be physically with. It is the energy of caring and compassion for all. Does this sound lofty? Yeah, well, to me it does. I mean, there are times and places Nod your head if you're in agreement with this. There are times and places where we feel like we can do this pretty easily, right? Do any of you have times and places where you're struggling to do it? This is usually when I say, do any of you have an ex? It could be an ex-spouse, an ex-lover, an ex-boss, an ex, fill in the blank. Do any of you have somebody that comes to mind when I ask you, sandpaper to the soul, right? Those are the places where a mature love says, how do I practice being the presence of love as I think about you? It doesn't mean you necessarily have to be, can be, or should be with that other, but how you are with that other in your consciousness is what matters. That's where the practice is. How we are with that other in consciousness. Love is responsive. The kind of love I'm talking about is responsive. It brings to the situation whatever it senses that situation needs. And that could be wholeness. That could be healing. It could be forgiveness. It could be acceptance. Being love says, I am here. How can I be a beneficial presence? Can you imagine if the only change, even half of the people on planet Earth were willing to make, if the only practice even half of us were willing to practice was this one, I'm here, how can I be a beneficial presence? What do you think would happen? Oh, a hell of a lot better, sorry for the language. It would be a total transformation, right? It would be a total transformation. It's not about the rules, which is what I think Bishop Spong was trying to point to when he talked about eternity in the quote that I shared with you earlier. It's not about religion as we usually think about religion. It's in many ways much more simple than that. Not simple to do, but much more simple. A heart and a mind that says, even if I don't feel like I can do it right now, I know I want to try to be a beneficial presence in this situation, in this relationship, in this time. That would fundamentally change our world. It would absolutely change our personal experience. In this series, as we've looked at the 7 virtues, we've also looked, and I've pulled from a book that the author is Thomas Becknell, and it's about a look at nature and how nature can be so supportive and so instructive to us about these kinds of virtues and qualities. And in a chapter that Becknell writes about the grace of love, he quotes from Thomas Merton, who was a Catholic monk and a writer. And Thomas Merton believed that nature could teach man not just how to live, but how to love. That nature could teach us something about not just how to live, but how to love. And some of the ideas that were brought out in that particular part of the book are these. I'll share them with you briefly. That love is extravagant. It seeks to transcend its own limitations. That love is extravagant. It seeks to transcend its own limitations. It's what Bishop Spong was saying in his words, to love lavishly, to love wastefully. He also put it that way, love lavishly, love wastefully. Love is extravagant, and it seeks to transcend its own limitations. The English novelist Richard Jefferies wrote about this extravagance in nature. He said, there is no enough in nature. It is one vast prodigality. I think I said that wrong. Anyway, it's one vast expression of extravagance. I even wrote it phonetically and I can't get it out this morning. It's one vast expression of extravagance. It's a feast. There is no economy in nature, he said. It's all one immense extravagance, no holding back, no limitation. Ernest Cardinal wrote in his piece on Meditations on Love, all things love each other, Everything in nature seeks to transcend its own limitations, to meet with a thou to which it can give itself. Nature, in its total embrace through all of its complex interconnections, is one vast expression of love because it yearns to surrender to something beyond itself. To surrender to something beyond itself is another way of looking at this idea of loving without limitation, to love as a beneficial presence, to seek to surrender to something beyond just our pretty small selves. In that chapter, he also says that love is not self-seeking. Love always protects, always cares deeply about the other's well-being, paraphrasing from 1 Corinthians. Love is not self-seeking. It always protects, it always cares deeply about the other. He points to certain examples in nature, points to robins and thrushes, two little birds that will emit a high screeching sound when a hawk is near. Now, these are two different kinds of birds. You would think that, it would all be about one protecting itself, forget the other, but they seem to share a language or a way of both being protected from a common threat. There are remarkable, inspiring and touching stories of what oceanographers have observed with some dolphins when they're caught in nets or harpooned or struggling, how other dolphins will often come to the rescue to lift them up, at least temporarily, so that they can breathe. Love is not self-seeking. It protects, it cares deeply about the other's well-being. And the last idea, love keeps no record of wrongs. It does not keep score. Love keeps no records of wrongs. It does not keep score. I love the little story, true story. I've told it before, but it lives in me as such a sweet, simple thing. That a couple who were celebrating their 50th anniversary, one of the younger attendees asked of the bride, the woman, what was your secret? How did you manage to be married happily together for 50 years? And the woman said, well, I decided on my wedding day or before my wedding day, I would make a list of my husband-to-be's faults. Now, this is going to sound contradictory to what I just said, but stay with it. And I listed those 10 faults. And I said to myself, if he ever does any of those 10 things, I will automatically forgive him. It's like his get out of jail free pass card. And so the other said, well, did it work? And she said, well, you know what? I just forgot what was on the list. So whenever he did anything, I would simply say, it must be on the list. So let's just move on with it. What a brilliant, how much, and I'm all for therapy. So if you're a counselor watching or sitting here, I'm not trying to take business away from you. But can you imagine if we kind of practice some of these simple things? That, it wouldn't just be about being in love. How many people separate when they say, well, I'm not in love with you anymore. Well, there's something more to love than just that, Some of these things, I think, in fact, the longer I live, the more I come to appreciate how many of the things that can truly change our lives individually and can do so much for our communities and our world are really rather simple. They don't take huge intellect, they don't take vast education, but just because they're relatively simple to understand, it takes a heart and a mind and I think a certain degree of humility to be willing to practice them. And that's where the real work is. So in closing, remember these words of Spong. One prepares for eternity not by being religious and keeping the rules, but by living fully, loving wastefully, daring to be all that each of us has a capacity to be. May you live your life through love in that way. Namaste.